I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Hey everybody, welcome back to Seamwork Radio. So today we're talking about quick creative things that you can do when you only have 10 minutes. So this is going to be a shorter episode for us, but we're going to cover 16 different things you can do if you're short on time, but you feel like doing something that's sewing related. We'll talk about a bunch of creative exercises to get your brain going, and also a few things you can do to prepare for your next sewing session. All right, so our icebreaker today, Haley, what project has been in your sewing queue for the longest, but you've never gotten around to making?
Okay, so I had to think a little bit about this, but I think the longest standing project in my sewing queue has been some kind of like statement coat. I want to make a winter coat. All of my winter coats are like kind of vanilla, and I've always wanted to make one that was just like kind of exciting that you could put on over like a regular outfit and would make it feel really special. So I'm thinking like pink or like a print or something with like a groovy fur collar, just something like that's a real statement, but it always feels so frivolous. So I never like, sit down and actually plan the project and make it. It's kind of like a vague idea, but I just think it would be a really fun project. And I love making outerwear, and I would probably wear it all the time.
Yeah. I have a pink coat that actually has a little faux fur removable collar. I don't know if I still have it actually. I might have had to donate it in the move, but it was really cute. But I brought it when we went on a trip to Central Europe many years ago, and pink coats are really not done in Central Europe. Like everybody wears black and gray in the winter. And as you know, that's the case in many parts of the world. And I felt like people were staring at me everywhere I went. Like I look like such a sore thumb. I've never really felt that way. Like everybody was just looking at me like, who is this crazy person in a pink coat? That's weird.
I could see that. I feel like here in Portland, though, like I would definitely like get some like thumbs up at the Fred Meyer, which is our grocery store out here.
Oh yeah, anything goes. Anything goes here. That's true for I feel like a lot of things in the United States. Anything goes in some parts of the United States. I think for me, the thing that has been in my sewing queue the longest is I've always wanted to make like a tuxedo style jacket, like a Yves Saint Laurent style like smoking jacket with the satin lapels and just like very slinky. And I've always wanted to make that. And I even bought this Donna Karan pattern that I thought would be great for it. And I think I even may have bought fabric for it at one point, which I might still have in my stash. But I just never got around to making it. And then now I live in the country and I really don't see where I would wear such a thing or why I would wear such a thing. I have a lot of blazers in my closet because I really like blazers, but it just doesn't feel very appropriate wearing them out here. So I don't know that I will ever get around to making it. It'd probably be nice for like a holiday party or something like that.
Oh, yeah.
Dress up occasion. But I love that look. I think it's so cool, but I don't know. I don't know if that'll ever happen now. So
that'd be hot. I like that idea.
That's mine. So
let's plan a really fancy party so you can do it.
Yeah.
I feel like you have to.
And I could do the whole like tux, the whole outfit. That would be great with matching pants. So if you have an icebreaker for us for a future episode, you can share it with us if you're a member. Go to seamwork.com/go/icebreakers, and that will take you right to the thread where you can share your icebreaker, and we'll use it on a future episode. So that's seamwork.com/go/icebreakers. All right, so let's get into it. So sewing can be a pretty time-intensive activity, I think. I find this all the time. It's just kind of hard to get started when you don't have a huge chunk of time. So sometimes it feels a little bit hard to fit into your schedule because it's hard to do in small increments sometimes, depending on what you're working on. But I think that there are these little things that you can do that can really just get your creativity going when you don't have much time, either just kind of get your brain churning on a particular project or even just kind of start creating ideas for future projects. And I think that's a great thing to do when you don't have a ton of time, when you just have a few minutes here and there. If you just have kind of in your back pocket a little list of activities. So we wanted to share some of our ideas with you about things that you can do when you only have about 10 minutes or so. So Haley, do you want to start us off?
Yes. So we came up with this big long list and we put them into all of the items into two categories. So the first category of items is get creative. So these are just like little creative things you can do to like get your ideas flowing a little bit. So tip number 1 is to explore your stash, whether that's your patterns or your fabric, without like a purpose in mind. Just get the ideas flowing, pull out the things that maybe you haven't thought of for a while, look at the pattern envelopes. I think that this is a really fun activity when you're feeling like in a little creative slump.
I did this pretty recently. I was looking for a particular pattern, but I ended up just looking through my whole stash of patterns. I have quite a few vintage patterns, and it was really fun. I rediscovered a bunch of things that I had forgotten that I had, and it gave me a lot of ideas for projects I could make in the future. So it was really fun.
Yeah, I mean, it's just fun to like enjoy your stash. You don't always have to be sewing it. You can also just enjoy it from time to time.
Mm-hmm.
Tip number 2 is while you're in there checking out your stash, cut some swatches and make a little color palette for yourself. You don't have to do anything with the color palette. You can just make a color palette to have fun. It can maybe get some ideas going on fabric combinations that you hadn't necessarily thought of before.
Mm-hmm.
Tip 3 is to sketch some designs. It doesn't matter if you are a practiced artist or not. Just doodle, make it fun, have fun with it. I love doing this. I'm like a big notebook person, so I always have like a notebook in arm's reach, and I do a lot of doodling.
I wish you could see the room I'm in right now because I'm just surrounded by notebooks. I have like a little table. I have a chair in this room with a little side table, and there are 2 notebooks sitting on it and one on the floor right next to it. And my desk also has notebooks on it. Just notebooks everywhere.
Yeah, we're definitely like notebook people. I can reach out and touch 2 separate notebooks from where I'm sitting right now, and I buy notebooks in bulk. I go through them so much. But yeah, sketch, have fun with it. Don't take it yourself too seriously, and just do some doodling. Tip number 4 is to pull out an inspiring book or find one detail or idea that you can incorporate into your sewing. It could be a color palette. It could be a texture, a detail, anything. If you're anything like me, you also collect fashion books or any kind of, visual book. I love like a coffee table book. Pull one of those out that's been collecting dust on your bookshelf and peruse it. Shop for some ideas. Tip number 5 is to study a garment that you like, and so you can emulate it in the future. This can be something that's in your closet. It can be something that's off the runway, or do a little online window shopping and really examine the garment. I think that this can be a really great way, not just to get ideas, but to learn about sewing.
Mm-hmm.
Number 6 is to make a list of quick and easy projects that you can sew. Sometimes it can be kind of like intimidating to do these more like conceptual, creative, like little creative activities, and maybe like looking at all of the fine details of a tailored jacket is intimidating and not really the kind of thing that gets you excited for sewing. But making a little list of some quick projects that you can make can be really inspiring and really motivating. Tip number 7 is to choose your most worn and least worn garments of clothing in your closet and think about why. Maybe make a little list of why you like to wear them or you don't reach for them as often. And this can be really helpful to help you make better sewing decisions in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Tip 8 is to write a list of adjectives to describe your style. This can be a super helpful exercise, especially if you're more in the planning stages of your upcoming projects. You can also make a list of criteria for future sewing projects. And tip number 10 is to research a sewing technique that you'd like to learn or learn more about and, gather a little bit of research for your future projects.
That's a fun one to do. I've been really interested in some old-fashioned sewing techniques and been doing a lot of research on those lately. It's very inspiring. So I'm going to share some tips for maybe something a little bit more tactical when you just want to prepare for your future sewing rather than, get your brain going in that creative way. Maybe you're just not in that headspace at the moment, but you want to do something sewing related or kind of just get ready. So one thing you can do is prep your sewing space for your next sewing session. I could probably use some of that right now, a little bit of tidying and just kind of getting things ready for sewing. And this could even include things like threading your sewing machine, threading your serger, getting out the materials that you need, anything that you need to do to just make you feel like you can jump into that next sewing project really easily, I think is a great thing to do. It's kind of like setting the table for the next session. The next one is to organize your fabric and notions for your next sewing project. So maybe get your fabric out, put it in a project bag, get all the notions that you need, make sure that you have the thread that you need in the right color, just kind of get everything organized. I think both of these things just help you to kind of be able to jump in really quickly. The third one is to put your fabric for your next few projects in the laundry for pre-washing. I think that's a big one. I think if your fabric is not pre-washed and ready to go, like that can be a huge hurdle to even starting to sew because, it just puts another barrier of time between you and the project. So get all your fabric, not just for your next project, but for the next few projects if you have it, and get those ready to go by pre-washing them. Print out a pattern that you plan to use. I think this is it's so simple, but it's really helpful. I think when I start sewing and I think about all the things that I need to do before I can even get to sewing. Like I need to go find the pattern. I need to print it out. I need to cut it out. I need to do all these things. The more you can kind of take little chunks of that off at the top, I think the easier it becomes to get excited about sewing. So maybe just print out the pattern, get that ready to use, and put it with your fabric as well. And then browse patterns and choose your next project or maybe your next 3 projects. You could, if you haven't already created your sewing queue, maybe you could start on a project like that and see what your next few projects are going to be, or even just browse and without even any intention of creating a sewing queue or making any final decisions about your next project. Maybe you could even just browse some patterns and pin them to a Pinterest board or something like that. Which brings me to the last thing, which is organizing your Pinterest boards. This is a funny one for me because Ken always laughs at me. My husband always laughs at me because I'm always doing what he calls Pinterest maintenance, like organizing all of my many boards on Pinterest. And like I have whole systems for like putting all my recipes into categories and things like that. But that can be a fun thing to do if you only have a few minutes, is just go in there and organize your boards. You can actually move pins around. It took me a while to figure this out. You can actually move pins around, like drag them around in a board. So you could even use Pinterest to create your sewing queue and take a picture and drag it to the top so that you can create like a little queue of projects in there. There's a lot of ways you can use Pinterest. Now, however you choose to use it, it can be good to do a little bit of maintenance. And it's kind of like going through your sewing stash in a way. It's sort of like remembering all of your ideas and everything that you have and everything you've collected over time, which I think can be really, really inspiring and also kind of get you ready and get you in the mood for your next project. So those are our tips. Were you going to say something, Haley?
Oh, I was just going to say that I'm like a real Pinterest nerd. I love getting in there and doing the Pinterest maintenance, which I will now be stealing that phrase from him.
He looks over my shoulder. I have my iPad and he looks over my shoulder and he's like, doing more Pinterest maintenance. It is kind of ridiculous how much time I spend like just organizing things into folders. But I don't know. For some reason, it's soothing for me. All right. So I'm just going to recap all of these tips really quick for all of you. So we had some tips on just getting creative and kind of using the right side of your brain a little bit. And then we had some tips for prepping for your next sewing project. So under the creative exercises, you could explore your stash of patterns or fabric without any kind of purpose. You could cut some swatches and make a color palette. You could sketch a few designs and just doodle. You could pull out an inspiring book and find some kind of detail or some kind of idea that you want to incorporate into your sewing in the future. You could study a garment that you'd like to emulate either online or from your own closet. You could make a list of quick and easy projects that you could sew in the future. You could choose your most worn and least worn items of clothing in your closet and think about why. You could write a list of adjectives to describe your style. You can make a list of criteria for your future sewing projects, things that your projects have to meet. You could research a sewing technique that you'd love to learn. And then to prepare for future sewing projects, some things you could do real quick are to prep your sewing space for your next sewing session. You could organize your fabric and notions for your next sewing project. You could put your fabric for your next few projects in the laundry for pre-washing. You could print out a pattern that you plan to use. You could browse patterns and you can choose your next project or just browse. And you can organize your Pinterest boards. So those are our tips. I'm sure there are many, many other things that you could do. If you have ones you want to add in a review, you could leave us a comment and let us know if there are other things that you do when you only have 10 minutes, but you want to do something sewing related. We'd love to hear more ideas from you. And I'm sure other people would too. So the other thing that I wanted to mention is that if you feel like your sewing space could use a little bit of a refresh, if that's kind of stopping you from sewing, then you might want to download the Ultimate Guide to Setting Up Your Sewing Space, which is a free mini guide we have that has tons of tips and ideas for creating a better and more functional sewing area, no matter how much space you have, whether you have a large space, you have a small space, there are tips in there for every size sewing space. So you can download it at promo.seamwork.com/sewing-spaces-guide. We'll put that in the show notes, but I'll read it one more time for you. It's promo.seamwork.com/sewing-spaces-guide. Go ahead and download it there. It's awesome. It has tons and tons of tips in there. And I think it's just a really inspiring little guide that might give you some ideas for what you could do with your own space, which I think is so key in just getting you ready to sew and making you feel like you want to jump into your next project. So if you liked this episode, this is a shorter one for us. And if you liked it, we would love to hear from you. You can leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever podcast platform you listen on. All right. You can also follow us on YouTube at Seamwork Video, the name of our channel, that's Seamwork Video. And you can follow us on Instagram at Seamwork. And if you'd like to join Seamwork and become part of our private community, you'll also get access to hundreds of sewing patterns and dozens of sew-along classes. And podcast listeners get a 50% off lifetime discount when you join at seamwork.com/go/podcast50. So that's seamwork.com/go/podcast50. And with that, we will see you next week. I'm Sarai.
And I'm Haley.
And this is Seamwork Radio. Seamwork Radio is brought to you by the team at Seamwork. Seamwork's an online community that supports you in creating a wardrobe that feels right for you. When you join us at Seamwork, you become part of our private community of makers, and you also get access to monthly sew-along classes, a library of over 200 sewing patterns, and tons of great resources to help guide you through the sewing adventure that you choose. podcast listeners can get half off a Seamwork Unlimited membership, which means you can download as many of those 200 plus patterns as you want at any time, and our community will be there to guide and support you. If you'd like to join us for half off, just visit seamwork.com/go/podcast50. You can also find us on Instagram at Seamwork, or visit our YouTube channel, which is called Seamwork Video. We love hearing from you, so let us know if there's a topic or a personal story that you'd like us to cover. Thanks for listening to Seamwork Radio.